What's up, everybody? This is the Hedge Mage, and welcome back to another Popper video and another Friday Night Magic report. Like we have done in our previous videos, I'm going to be going over today what my experience was like playing at Friday Night Magic over this last weekend, doing a quick overview of the deck that I played, both in the main board and the sideboard, as well as giving a quick summation of how each matchup went, and as well as my analysis of my performance as a player, how the deck performed, and maybe even taking a look at ways we might want to improve the deck and how we want to push it in the future. So if that sounds interesting to you, definitely stick around. As always, if you want to support the channel and you like the janky content that I create, if you could leave a like on this video and hit that subscribe button, I would greatly appreciate the support. And if you haven't figured it out by now based on the title of this video or the thumbnail, we played a Rakdos Madness, also known as Rakdos Blood Burn or just Rakdos Burn. Sometimes you see it listed as that, which by one of the regulars at my LGS, they kindly refer to this deck archetype as a burn with extra steps, which I think puts it very well, as it's a little bit different than a conventional burn deck, which is just slinging one mana spells and doesn't have really a whole lot of tricks. They just turn mana into 3 damage. But this deck runs a little bit differently. It utilizes the madness mechanic, which essentially, if you discard a card that has a madness cost, you may then cast it for its madness cost when it's discarded. So there's a lot of discard outlets in this deck. Primarily, the blood tokens are one of the main ways that you can discard cards, but there are a few other ways as well. So yeah, let's get into the list and what I brought in for Friday Night Magic of this week. So in the main deck, we got 12 creatures. I got 4 copies of Voldaren Epicure, which are it's a pretty good card for the deck. Definitely a staple in the format right now, as it deals damage when ETBs and creates a blood token, which is really important for Madness, as that gives us a discard outlet that we can use either right away or later in the game. This is a very powerful first turn play for the deck. So we got 4 of those, as well as 4 copies of Scrapwork Mutt. This is also a discard outlet, and the beauty of this is a 2-color deck, and this, at least when we play it from our hand, has 2 generic mana, so we can use mana of any color to cast this, which is very, very important because, all of our madness costs are gonna be in one of the 2 colors. And depending on what our mana base is looking like at the time, being able to choose wisely which lands we tap is very, very important. Not to mention, this also has an unearth cost, so we have some recursion with it as well. Very good card for the deck, and was a new addition as of last year. So really love the mutts in this deck. And then we got the star of the show when it comes to our creatures. That is the Kitchen Imp. So this is the main attacker in the deck, as it does have flying, and it is a 2/2 flyer. We can with haste, so we can cast it for 1 black if we discard it. So that is the main attacker there, and then we're going to get into our instant and sorcery pile now. So I got 1 Fruit of Tyzir. So this is 1 black to have target player lose 2 life. So basically it's a shock, though the big bonus here is that it also has an escape cost, which means we can, as long as we have enough cards in our graveyard, we can cast this more than once, which is kind of a big deal. Often with burn, you will find yourself in a situation where you have played your hand and you just need maybe 1 or 2 more damage to basically close the game. You don't usually have a very big board presence in terms of defenses, so you want to do that as quickly as possible. This allows you a little extra gas since it does have an escape cost. So but I'm only running one of it as there is another card that we can play from our graveyard that I'm running four of that is, in my opinion, much better. All right, and then here's a new card that I've been trying out in the deck. This is a Witch's Mark, and I'm running two of them. Um, the one downside of this card that I've been realizing is that it, as a discard outlet, it's not part of the cost, it's part of the effect of the spell. So we only get to discard when when this spell resolves. But another beautiful part of this is that it creates a Wicked Roll token attached to a creature you control, and the best target for that is probably going to be either your Scrapwork Mutt or your Kitchen Imp. Whatever you have on the battlefield, as Scrapwork Muck is definitely something that we want to use as a blocker so that we can recast it from our graveyard, or not recast it. We are just returning it to play with Unearth. But that is lets us discard some more, play more of our madness cards, and basically, when a creature dies that has a Wicked Roll token on it, our opponent loses a life, which is very important, not to mention giving it an extra power. So on the Kitchen Hip, we now have a 3/3 flyer, if that was already on the battlefield. All right, and then we're also running four copies of Vampire Kiss, or Vampire's Kiss, pardon me, which is another drain spell, so two life. We gain two and create two blood tokens. So that really lets us create a lot of blood on top of the blood we get from our Voldaren Epicure. And that just creates more discard outlets, so more ways to discard cards and play cards for madness. And then one of our favorite cards in the deck is Faithless Looting, and running four copies of that. This also has flashback, so we have a lot of things with some type of recursion through either Unearth, Escape, or Flashback. So Faithless Looting is definitely one of the best cards in the deck, because we get to play two menace cards sometimes. So this is definitely a card that I like to play more mid game. And maybe by turn three, generally I don't want to play it before that because we want to make use out of the two cards that we discard from it. So, and then we are also running four Bump in the Night. So this is one mana for three life. It also has flashback, though the flashback is pretty high, but it is a great card to play from your graveyard very late game. I have seen some decks not playing Bump in the Night and playing things like Chain Lightning instead. I really like Bump in the Night. There is a little more versatility with something like Chain Lightning, as you can also target creatures as well as go face. Bump in the Night only goes face, but it does have flashback, which I think is a very important thing to have in a deck like this, especially with all the counter spells and blue decks that you see in the current meta game. You want to maybe uh, play this again later. So. And then we're also running four copies of Alms of the Vein. This is another burn spell that drains our opponent for three, so we gain three off of that. Also has a madness cost of one black. And then we also have four copies of Fiery Temper, which if we play it for its madness cost, is basically like a lightning bolt. So very good card. And I'm also running three copies of Lightning Bolt because Lightning Bolt is one of the best burn spells, has been for basically the beginning of Magic, but only running three. Um, and then I got four copies of Galvanic Blast. Since we do create a lot of artifacts with all of our blood tokens, it is very easy to get Metalcraft. So one mana for four damage is very, very powerful and very good for the deck. All right, and then we're on an 18 land build here. So I got four copies of Great Furnace, four Vault of Whispers, four copies of Drossforge Bridge. I got one Forgotten Cave, as I pretty much always run one cycling land in most of my decks. And then I got two copies of a basic swamps and three copies of basic mountains. And that's the main deck. And then, obviously got our tokens here, our blood token and our wicked roll token. And then in the sideboard, I brought in one copy of Lightning Axe, as this is a great way to deal with things like Avenging Hunter, as well as things like maybe a Cryptic Serpent or a Gurmag Angler. It's gonna not be the greatest against a Tolarian Terror, as we're gonna get taxed for it, though it is a one mana spell, since it's also a discard outlet, so we can also play a Madness card off of that. So it has a lot of synergy of the deck, though I'm only running one of right now in the sideboard. I also got one copy of Duress, and we're definitely going to be bringing this against, our control matchups or anyone running blue. We're going to want to get rid of, especially uh, after the first game, we know that they are probably going to be running Hydroblast or Blue Elemental Blast. We're going to want to take that away from them, as that is like one of the more efficient cards against us. Or just take out a counterspell. That works too. And then I'm running 3 copies of Cast into the Fire, which is a great way to deal with indestructible lands as well as just really good utility artifacts. Also, we can use it to sweep the board somewhat on people with 1 toughness creatures. Fairies, for example, it's really great, especially when they tap out for a spell stutter. We can kill the spell stutter and maybe whatever other fairy that they have, and hope that that's enough not to get our stuff countered. All right. And then 3 copies of Red Elemental Blast. This is, again, very good against the blue decks. Then we got 3 copies of Nihil Spellbomb. So bringing this against any deck playing out of the yard, Tolarian Terror is the prime one. And then I got 4 copies of Innocent Blood. And this is a card that I have been running against Boggles since I really started playing this deck when Boggles was really popular at my LGS. Though I'm at the point now with the deck where I'm probably going to be cutting these for some other things. We'll be getting into that in a moment. But for now, let's kind of talk about the matchups and how they went. So, my first match was against Is It Fairies. We actually won the first game, which I was kind of surprised. I wasn't really expecting to win that first game, as Fairies is a pretty tough matchup for this deck just because of counter spells. If they counter the right spells at the right time, it's going to be really, really hard for us. Not to mention, we don't have a lot of defense when it comes to dealing with flyers, or just really at all. A lot of our cards aren't really going to be able to deal with the fairies before sideboarding. I mean, after sideboarding, we do have things like Cast in the Fire and Red Elemental Blast that we can bring in against them. So we definitely have plays, but that first match or first game in the round is definitely very hard. So I was surprised that we did win that one. However, it kind of went all downhill from there after sideboarding. I didn't really see any of the stuff that we brought in against them, as I did bring in the Cast and the Fires as well as the Red Elemental Blasts. However, could not seem to draw one in either of the games. I think maybe I drew one Cast in the Fire. It was not enough though. Um, so yeah, I did lose that match. So I did win the first game, lost the remaining two, as they did bring in Tolarian Terrors as well, and we just could not deal with the Tolarian Terrors. So that they just started swinging for way more than we could really hope to deal with, and just couldn't get enough pressure on their life total, as a lot of our spells are 1 or 2 mana, so it's very easily countered by a spell stutter sprite. So that was a pretty rough match, but did kind of go the way I expected it to, just because it is not a very good matchup for the deck. And in the second game, played against elves, which as definitely after that game against elves, I have been thinking a bit about how I want to change the deck, as the go wide strategy is very, very, very hard to deal with, especially when all we have is Cast in the Fire to deal with small creatures. So I think some instant speed sweepers like Electrickery are definitely going to be things that we're going to want to bring in, or maybe even some Echoing Decay as well. So I think we will be probably taking out these Innocent Bloods in favor of some other things, though I may still keep one in. I haven't really committed to how I want to change the sideboard as of yet, but I did win 0 games against elves, and they won 2 games against us. So that was a pretty rough match, especially cards like Well Wisher. They do so much, and if we are unable to kill the Well Wisher right away, it's kind of game over, especially with how many elves they can get out onto the field. So basically, they're gaining like 6 to 10 life every turn, or even more if they have a Curion Ranger on the field, as they can then untap it and do it again. So I remember, I think it might have been the first game against elves. I kept drawing lands, so I was flooding. I kept, sacking blood tokens. I was just fishing for a lightning bolt because they had just played a well wisher on the previous turn. So I was like, okay, I know I have to kill this thing before they untap with it. Otherwise, it's game over. Didn't happen. Could not find the bolt. I kept discarding lands only to draw more lands. Yep. So that was pretty rough. I mean, anytime you are playing any kind of burn deck whatsoever, when you start flooding out, it is really what really changes the game for you. So that was very tough. So we did lose to elves. Last game or last match of the evening was against Golgari Gardens, and I was honestly surprised, but we went 2-0 against Gardens. Yeah, big surprise there. I was not really expecting that. I can definitely see this deck having a good matchup on the first game against Gardens, though after sideboarding and then bringing in things like Weather the Storm, I don't really see this deck going very well. Also, some lists also run things like Fangren Hunter. I think it's Fangren Hunter. Whatever the big fatty is that they gain like 5 life every time artifact goes to the graveyard, which is a really brutal. As you know, anytime they sack a treasure or sacrifice an Ichor Wellspring or a Lembas, they're gaining 5 life, and with the Lembas, it's even worse since they also are gaining another 3 life if they're activating the ability of that card. So yeah, or maybe it's Fangren Marauder. I can't remember the name of the card. All I know is that it completely hoses this deck. However, in the second game, my opponent did reveal this to me later after we had finished, that they had tapped their mana wrong, that they did have a Weather the Storm in hand, but as they were playing their spells, they tapped their only land that created green mana at the moment, thereby throwing the game to us. As then when I untapped, I just had, I think, 2 or 3 bolts and another imp to attack with while they were tapped out. And so I did end up winning game 2 as well, which I was not expecting at all. So definitely feel like I got very lucky with that match. Overall, we went 1-2 for the event, so not a very good performance for the deck. It definitely seems like a very hard deck to win with in the current meta, especially against, Tolarian Terror decks. They are a very hard match. I definitely feel like I did play it my best. Definitely there were a lot of RNG factors at play. Some, I think, of my mulligan decisions, there were times where like I should have probably mulliganed more aggressively. So I think there's definitely some ways I could have improved my own performance as a player piloting this deck. And definitely, I think there are some ways that we want to change our sideboard, especially so we can deal with things like is it fairies or Dimir fairies more effectively, as well as if we did get matched up with Koldatha Red or against Koldatha Red, we are definitely going to want to have some more instant speed sweepers against them. since they are definitely going to be a much quicker deck. We're a bit more grindy in the Madness plan. It's a lot grindier as a play style. So faster decks like Cold Off the Red are definitely going to get the drop on us. So yeah, we shall see how what I'm gonna do to change this. Definitely going to be dropping, if not all the innocent bloods from the sideboard, most of them. We might keep one in, or I might drop three and add a second duress so that we can go up against the decks with counter spells a little bit more effectively. And that's gonna do it for today's video, guys. Would love to hear your thoughts on this deck and ways in which you would maybe want to improve the sideboard or even things in the main board. Would definitely love to hear from you in the comments section below about that. As always, I hope you all are having a wonderful day, and I will see you all next time.